What's going on YouTube? We're back to another video. If your day's not going good, I hope tomorrow is better. If you're trying to subscribe, click the subscribe button and notification bell. If you're already subscribed, thank you for your loyalty. Today we are at the school that I graduated from, North Tech, home in its areas, and in this video we're going to be talking about how to film basketball games like a pro. This video is going to be similarly set up to how I did the football video back in almost a year ago. I'm just going to give you guys 3 major ways to improve yourself as a basketball videographer. And after I give the 3 major tips, I'm going to leave you guys with a couple key things to remember. The first thing we're going to start off with is equipment. When starting with equipment, obviously you got to start with the most important thing that you're going to need, which is a camera. Now, I'm not going to recommend the most expensive camera in the world, but if you are trying to record like a pro, you cannot cheap out. I would honestly usually recommend the 𝒂𝒓 III, but it's starting to become a little washed out and a little drained out in terms of the quality of it nowadays because of the new 𝒂𝒓 IV that just dropped and because, you know, like the 𝒂𝒓s III and stuff like that. Those would be like better cameras for you to start off with if you still want to produce really great quality content. My top 3 recommendation would definitely be the 𝒂𝒓 IV. 𝒂𝒓 III, if you're on a budget, it still holds its own. 𝒂𝒓 III, 𝒂𝒓 IV, and the 𝒂𝒓s III if you really got it like that. As y'all know, I shoot Sony, but in terms of the Canon counterparts, I'm not quite sure. You could just look up the comparisons yourself. And in terms of Nikon and all those other camera brands, because I'm not too familiar, so I'm not even gonna recommend y'all those cameras. Next thing I'm gonna talk about, which is also arguably really up there with one of the most important, is definitely gonna be your lens. Your lens is gonna be what creates the image that you get. The 2 lenses I would recommend off rip are gonna be the same lenses that I recommended for football. You're definitely gonna wanna get you a 24-70, and you're 100% gonna wanna get you a telephoto, which is just a 70-200. Nothing too crazy. You don't need a 100-400 for a basketball game. You don't have to get the branded one to your camera brand. If you're on a budget, you're on a budget. But the one thing you definitely wanna make sure, because you're shooting indoor, you wanna make sure that you get a 2.8 f-stop. You want to get as much light pulled in from wherever you are as possible without bumping up that ISO so much. Lastly, which is also quite important, it's not as important, but it is quite important if you want to upgrade the quality of your content, definitely get a shotgun mic. The better the shotgun mic, the more audio you're going to be able to pull in from wherever you're shooting. So I would definitely say 100% get a shotgun mic. I'm not really too sure of the brands or how good they get or how expensive they are, but a shotgun mic is definitely a necessity. The next thing that we're going to be talking about are your camera settings. The first thing that you definitely want to make sure is that when shooting any type of action videography, you always want to make sure you're shooting at your highest FPS as possible. I don't know about 240, but if you can't shoot at 240, go crazy. But you definitely want to make sure you're shooting at least 120 FPS so that you can get that extra slow-mo, and so that when you have things moving fast on your screen, you're capturing a lot of it. There's not as much motion blur, although sometimes depending on what you're editing, motion blur may be what you want. But typically, if you want that slow-mo, you're shooting at 120. The next thing that corresponds with you having FPS at 120, make sure your shutter is double your FPS. So if your FPS is at 120, make sure your shutter is at 240, 250. Simple. It's a simple concept. 120, double it. 60, double it. 240, double it. That's why sometimes I don't know if you want to shoot at 240 when you're shooting indoor, because the higher your shutter, the darker your image will be. So if you're shooting at 240 FPS, your shutter is going to have to be like 500. It's crazy. The next thing that you're going to want to do for your settings is shooting in log. Now, this is all personal preference. This doesn't really change too much, but if you really want to up your creativity, you shoot in log and you can have full creativity over the colors that your images have. You add your own creative style to your videos and your content so that when people see your stuff and see your work, they know it's you because of how you style it. One thing that corresponds to your picture profile is going to be your ISO. Now, your ISO is all based off of your environment, where you're shooting at. Hopefully you're shooting with a 2.8 lens, but if you're not, you're going to have to bump your ISO up a little more. Typically when I'm shooting, I have my ISO at around 600-700 because usually it's not too dark, but I am shooting at 120 FPS, so my shutter is at 250. Now, when I'm shooting in log, the log that I use, which is S-Log, I have to make sure that my image is pretty bright for me to get the best possible image once I color grade. In certain situations, like when I'm shooting at night, it's not in my best interest to shoot in S-Log. Sometimes it's best to shoot in picture profile 5 or 6 on my A1. Once you start hitting a certain level of, ISO on a certain camera, the grain starts to become really bad. For the most part, image becomes unusable. And lastly, for settings, it's definitely going to be your focus area. If you're shooting any type of action sport, you want to make sure that your focus area is very small so that you can be very selective of what you're having in focus. And you don't want something moving past your screen or something to the left of who you actually want to focus. And because you have a wide focus area, it's focusing on the wrong thing. So I keep my focus area very tight, and I just make sure that I'm tracking the ball wherever I go. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about is positioning. Now, positioning is very important when it comes to any type of anything you're recording. So there are 2 positionings that are crucial to me personally. My personal favorite position is the overhead position. That's where you're shooting from either at the top of the stands or at the top of something so that you can see the whole court. Nothing's gonna be getting in your way of your shot or anything like that, and you just have full coverage of the whole entire court. But the most sought after position is definitely baseline. Similar to football, when you're sitting under the goalpost, it's very similar to this. It's the same way. You're sitting under the baseline, you're sitting under the basket. Don't sit directly under the basket. You don't want people running into you after they finish a play, but definitely like a little bit to the left or the right of the baseline. The reason why I don't like baseline that much is because you have referees that'll be walking in front of you. Now, if you have a player at the top of the key and you have some players that are also in the paint, you may end up losing the shot. So if he takes a shot at the top of the key, but you have somebody in the paint that's blocking your shot, it's a completely missed shot. Versus if you're sitting at the top of the stance, you get whatever you want to get. You know what I'm saying? However, when you're sitting at baseline, that footage looks so much better. The footage looks a lot more fast-paced, it's a lot more in your face, and it's just a lot more sought after, and it's a lot more appealing to look at. My best advice would definitely be to shoot in both, right? You could do one half of the game baseline, one half of the game up in the stands, maybe just whatever looks better based off of where you're shooting, whatever the case may be, but I definitely recommend trying both. See what you like more, what works best for you based off the games you're at. That is pretty much all for the 3 major things that can help you improve yourself as a basketball videographer. Now we're just gonna get into the key things to remember. Number one, always make sure that you are tracking the ball. That is the best and the most easiest way that you're gonna be able to make sure you're capturing every shot that you need. Track the ball. Another tip that correlates with that tip is 100% do not take your eyes off the camera. Do not be like this and look up at the game just because things are interesting or something like that, because you're gonna do that and you're gonna miss your shot. Because you're gonna go from looking at it from here to ending up, you know, looking at it from here, and now your shot is down here versus where you're looking at. You know what I'm saying? If you're doing video, watch the game through your lens. I promise you that's gonna be the easiest way to make sure that all your shots are amazing. For the last key thing to remember, if you are gonna be using any of your footage for mixtapes, definitely make sure you arrive to the game early and shoot a lot of B-roll during warm-ups. Shoot a lot of B-roll of the court. If it's a home game, shoot a lot of B-roll of the player that's gonna be getting the mixtape while they're warming up. Get a lot of shots of them as they're putting up shots, stretching, all of that. It'll definitely increase the value and the quality of your mixtape. And yeah. One thing I did want to do is I want to thank you guys for 1,000 subs. The support has been crazy, definitely since I've been uploading a whole lot more. I appreciate it. A lot more sports content coming soon, and a whole lot of other content too. Definitely a lot more. I want to do a lot more portrait content as well. A lot more like strobe flash photography stuff as well. We'll see how you guys like that. But yeah, thank you guys for the support. Thank you guys for watching this video. Don't forget to drop a like, subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the merch link in the description down below. That's pretty much it. See you guys after. Peace.